Okay, you'd like me to begin with the roll call?
Yes, please.
John Mailing,
Here.
Cheryl Brown,
Here.
Matt Pence,
Here.
Catherine Knight,
Here.
and Matt Merluzzi.
Yep.
I think that is it. You have 5 at the moment.
Okay, there's 5 of us. Good. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Do we have anybody online for public comments? Does anybody want to address us at the moment?
If no, I don't think so.
Okay.
There's well, if you are an attendee and would like to speak, use the raise your hand feature.
Yeah, it's not, it isn't a sort of a, if you aren't here, you miss your chance. I mean, if there's something that the public wants to say, somehow or other, we'll figure out a way to let them say it, and to hear what the concern is. Okay, on to number 4, receipt and discussion. S22-591, 14 Apple Tree Lane, Grumman Engineering. A memorandum from staff has been circulated, which presumably we've all had a chance to look through, and we all discussed this in some detail at earlier meetings. Does anybody have any comments on the contents of the staff memorandum, which includes a kind of a summary of where we are? Matt, were you about to raise your hand? No.
You want me to share my screen and you can look at the revised plan together? Or
Yeah.
no?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So here it is. Previously, the limit of disturbance kind of hugged the proposed grading line. It's now pulled back just a little bit, and in addition to the silt fence line, there are now some clear demarcations both on the plan and proposed in the field. So there is a note here added about a proposed boulder demarcation line and what the approximate size of those boulders would be. And then likewise, it's labeled edge of proposed lawn at the silt fence. So the lawn would extend in this area, and then the buffer, which at a minimum is 37 feet from the wetland line, other than the temporary intrusion with the installation of the footing drain. And then the only other comment I had in my staff report was this 130-inch diameter tree. I suggested that it be saved and that there be some tree protection for that tree. And Mr. Dean Martin is present. I didn't know if you wanted to give a recap or had any additional comments.
Are you there, Dean?
Yep, here I am. Sorry. Yeah, no, Alexis just went over the changes that were made. As she noted, we extended the limit of the lawn area slightly further towards the wetland, just so that in the future, if the pool is constructed, additional lawn won't be cleared at that time. What's shown on the plan as the limit of lawn will be the limit of disturbance in the future. We did add 1 additional tree for a total of 3 new trees to replace the 2 trees that are being removed. And that's about it.
I have a question. About the 30-inch tree. The Connecticut guidelines for soil erosion and sediment control, the bulletin 34. I gather this is a pretty heavily referred to source. I looked up the tree protection portion in it, and it's rather specific and very detailed. And I wonder, I mean, how would you approach preserving that tree according to the guidelines?
Well, I think what we would do is put some snow fencing around the root zone. And then we could,
You're familiar with this. The section that I have looked at is the one on protecting vegetation. And it goes on for many pages. And it has some interesting schematics. And I'm just wondering whether or not these tree protection zones and diameter calculations and whatever would be part of the process of protecting this tree.
well, I mean, yeah, we could certainly make that a condition of the approval, that the tree be appropriately protected, that 30-inch, I believe it's an oak tree.
Well, it is a condition in the staff draft, but when would that protection begin? I mean, would that be one of the first things done in the process of preparing the site? And
Right, so Mr. Martin does not have the staff report in front of him, but in the staff report that has a draft resolution to approve with conditions, I added a condition that you talked about, kind of saving that 30-inch tree, 30-inch diameter tree, using the methods that are outlined in the 2002 guide. And I guess you could add to the beginning of that condition, prior to the commencement of regulated activities, just like the condition for installing the silt fence begins with
Right.
prior to the start of. So that's a good point.
That's a very good idea. I don't think I can't see why it would matter hugely to the applicant as to when this protection was installed, but in my view, the sooner the better. Anyway, okay. Thank you. Anybody else with, excuse me, comments on the application? I would just point to section 8. There's a line issuance of a certificate of compliance. And then I kind of lost, there's a word lost in there somewhere. For will not be issued or something.
The certificate for compliance.
Yeah. Issuance of a certificate of compliance for the project, or for what?
For a certificate of compliance in order to get a certificate of occupancy, or a CO.
Okay, so a certificate of compliance will not be issued until this as-built foundation survey is completed.
Correct. It's loading. Hold on a second. Correct. So an as-built foundation survey has to be completed, and in addition to the typical as-built survey that shows the location of the foundation, it also has to show the wetlands and watercourses, and then the area described by the boulder demarcation row, including the buffer on one side and the limit of lawn on the other. And that as-built plan has to be filed on the land records, and that's done prior to the Conservation Office sign off for a certificate of occupancy, which is issued from the building department.
How might commissioners get a look at this thing when it's done, this survey?
The filed map. I can make a note to remember to scan it and send it to you.
That'd be great.
Okay.
I haven't seen an as-built survey yet as related to an application, so it's kind of a educational effort.
Right. And so the as-built survey is done by a land surveyor once the foundation is installed, but before they begin the superstructure.
Okay.
And so the as-built is used by zoning to make sure that before the full investment of the structure is initiated, that the building is located in the right location.
But it shows very specifically how the structure interrelates to the environmental features of the property.
Right. It will verify the location of the building in relation to the boulder demarcation wall. And we can make sure that the plan that Mr. Martin drafted was actually implemented correctly in the field.
Okay, great. Commissioners, any other comment on plannings or on the hearing none? I'm going to move that the application S22-591 14 Apple Tree Lane be granted, subject to the conditions and discussions that we've just had. And incorporating those conditions as outlined in the memorandum from staff of April 8th. So ends my motion.
Second that motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, any further discussion?
No, I will just add that Commissioner Valiant did arrive at 6:03.
Oh,
So there are now 6 of you.
well, that's very timely. Commissioner
Sorry about that.
Valiant, no. We're at the discussion portion of the motion on 14 Apple Tree Lane, which included some talk about trees, which I know is something that you care about. And I'm just wondering whether there was anything that you noticed in the application that you want to bring up or put on the table before we vote.
No, I think I heard pretty much all the conversation, so I'm good.
Okay,
Thank you.
then we are in a position to vote. All in favor of the motion, please just say aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the application's granted. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay, moving on to S22-592, 47 Richards Avenue, 651, 667, et cetera, Connecticut Avenue, MBI, proposed demolition of existing buildings. Again, public hearing is closed on this.
Correct.
And we're only in a position, correct me, Alexis, but with the only options for us at this stage of the game are to grant or deny this application. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can continue discussion. You have a few more meetings to discuss if you want to discuss. You didn't have a lot of discussion following the close of the hearing at the last meeting. And then correct, after any discussion would be to act on the application.
Right. Speaking for myself, I don't see why we couldn't act on the application unless there's something more that commissioners feel needs to be addressed and looked into. If so, please, step up. Otherwise, I'll make a motion to, as outlined in staff's memo of somewhere or other that I have here. April 8th, that the application S-22-592 be granted to MBI for property at 47 Richards Avenue, subject to the modifications and conditions in the memo dated April 8th.
I second that.
Okay, moved and seconded, and any discussion? Okay, now we can take a vote. All in favor of granting the application, say aye.
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 Opposition? Hearing none, the application is granted. Thanks to the applicant.
And applicant permittee, you're welcome to send me an email or call tomorrow, and I can go over the conditions of the permit. There was nothing earth shattering. I know it mentions a modification, and that's just a modification of the expansion of the area that's seeded with a meadow mix. But that's it. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So moving now, we are back at S-22-593-1 Old Kings Highway. I have a general sense of this, and I have a schematic from prior meetings, which
Yeah,
is,
so I'll share the screen. We did get a revised
that'd be great.
plan. So there are actually two things that I added to the website. So the revised plan, which I had, I think I had emailed the applicant to ask what was the revision, because I couldn't find it at first, but I think it has to do with the note.
It's there. It's there.
Regarding no filling proposed in the flood zone. Is that the note?
No.
No.
There's a note that line of disturbance. Where's that
Silt
note?
fence limit of disturbance typical?
Yes. Silt fence limit of disturbance. The silt fence is the limit of disturbance. So nothing would be disturbed past the line of the silt fence. That included that stone wall. You're not looking at my arrow, I'm sure. But
So would this be a buffer? The last time we talked about, like, there's the disturbance, but then there's also like the not manicured area.
Yeah, all of that, I don't have a directional arrow, but
You
we'll
can
just call
share your screen if you like.
No, that's all right. But anything towards the river below the silt fence line would be left completely natural. No planting, grading, anything south, maybe it's south of that silt fence line. And I've looked at the property closely. I like the natural terrain. There's moss and the rocks and all that stuff. And, it's fine. It's totally fine. There's no reason to do anything beyond that silt fence line. No raking, no grading, no planting, no changing the natural sort of ground cover. I don't have an issue with that.
Okay.
I don't like it. I think that was really the only.
I think that's fine.
It's fine. You can make a condition of it, and I understand now you're doing more. I understand everybody's doing more sort of final site inspections relative to what was applied for, which is fine. And I think that's a sort of a condition of a final approval.
So something that I would like to see, because the silt fence is temporary and it's it's kind of a hard line to follow
Right.
once the silt fence is gone. It would be nice to have some kind of demarcation so that, the lawn area and manicured areas don't slowly over time kind of extend past
Agreed.
that.
Yeah. What are you suggesting?
Some people use boulders, some people use fences, something that's more permanent than, just a silt
Right,
fence
right.
line.
I think my engineer mentioned that sometimes I like boulders. I'm just not, not loving the aesthetic of a
Mhm.
bunch of boulders stacked up in an unnatural line to create this demarcation line. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, there are other options too,
And fence is not an
more-
option. That's
more,
it's a weird shape.
Mhm.
Right. I mean,
Um,
some people do kind of portions of single rail, split rail, but not a whole
Mm.
fence, but sections.
Plantings, sometimes
Plant-
shrubs,
Plantings.
like something that basically makes it hard to kind of maneuver around and extend.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I hear you. I hear you. And I'm trying to think, I'm thinking off the top of my head, lines of grasses that would create, I want something natural and not, just, sort of token and doesn't make sense. It's got to be natural. If there was a line of grasses that sort of flowed, along that line, that clearly below that there was nothing there, I could see something like that. And I will talk to my engineer who's more knowledgeable about this, but I'm open to suggestions too. When we get out there on the site and we're sort of working there, you sort of, you get a better sense of what's going on. But and quite honestly, if I was going to do that, I'd probably pull that. You're not looking at my arrow, sorry. I'd probably pull that belly down just south of the south of that. I'd probably pull that up to create more of a uniform line because it seems a little strange. Exactly. Take that sort of more right across, Alexis, on a straight line. Yeah.
But you
And
still
just
have
go
your,
past that. I mean, I understand there's going to be some disturbance right there, but let it grow back naturally. And
gotcha.
then put the
So you
line.
may have a different line. You may have a silt fence line, and then you may have a separate buffer lawn limit line.
That looks like
Yep.
that looks like you knew what you were doing. Sort of a more straight line to pull that
Yep.
belly out of there. So if you go right there and then straight
Use
across.
this as a part of your marker.
Yeah, and just come right across there and then tie back up. Then you can, at least it looks like, okay, this is a nice line and it's relatively straight enough to create a separation. So I'm happy to work that out and work with staff to ensure that that's what we've got and protect the rest of the area. As I said, not an issue. There's very natural ground cover there that is very nice. So.
Well, it sounds pretty responsive. It seemed like we ought to be able to affect that in the next week or two, Alexis, and so that we can
Yeah,
get.
I think so. The other thing that I posted was the Public Works comments, and there is just some minor things. And so it sounds like if you're going to be going back to your engineer with some of these minor, this came in today, so I just posted it. But
So can I ask a question?
minor grading.
Who created DPW? Where did they come from? I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
most of this stuff is pretty straightforward,
Yep.
but it's like, this is a whole nother level
just
of,
minor tweaking. Yep, this is all related to the city is required by the federal government to regulate all basically all stormwater and all runoff and discharge.
and this is just a sort of catch up to sort of the real world that's going on where
Yep.
there's too much water going places they probably shouldn't be.
Correct.
Understood.
So yeah, if you return to McCord Engineering, it sounds like pretty minor tweaks at this point. And
Harry, McCord Engineering's handling it. I went over with them today. They said, yeah, not a problem. We'll have this in a couple of days and submit it back to Wilbur. So I'm trying. I would, would obviously, I'd like an approval tonight with a condition. I'm trying, this has been a long haul. None of you know about it, so it doesn't matter. But, I'm trying to, we have health and zoning. Tammy and I are pretty much okay on what we've got. So I'm just trying to wrap this thing up as quickly as possible to get going. That's all I'll say.
You're getting close.
Yeah, I think it sounds like we're in a position to move at the next meeting, which is the 26th. Is that right, Alexis?
Yes.
Okay, that'd be a target. Any commissioners, anything further on this application? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Glazer.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And so moving on, we're, unless somebody digs in their heels, we're pretty close to the end here. We have approval of minutes, but the minutes are to be distributed. We'll have them next time around.
Yes.
There's no rush, Alexis. Okay.
Oh, there is a rush.
But you're going to get somebody to type them up anyway, so it's going to be worth giving that
Hope
person,
so.
a good solid chunk of work to get started with. Comments of staff, if you want to later on.
Sure. I did want to mention that the Common Council has formed a ad hoc committee on sustainability and resilience. I think I got its name wrong, but you get the idea. They are going to meet on this Thursday, the 14th at 6, and they're hosting John, I'm going to mess up his name, John from Circa. Circa, which is the acronyms. So it's a Center for Coastal Resilience through UConn. They have received a variety of grants, and they've been looking at areas across the coast of Connecticut where there are, they call them zones of shared risk, where there are multiple layers of vulnerability to climate change. And South Norwalk was chosen by Circa as in their last and third phase of this resiliency project. And he will be in front of the ad hoc committee on Thursday explaining the resilient SONO project that will be going on for about the next year. So I just wanted to let you know, if in the past, the ad hoc committee has been meeting on Tuesdays at 6 p.m., which is when you meet.
Yeah.
But this month, and they're trying to figure out when they're going to meet, but this month it's on Thursday. So
What time is it?
if 6 p.m.
And in the committee room or the conference room?
It is, I think it is a online meeting. I can send you the,
Oh, it's an online meeting.
it's an online meeting still. They're at the cusp of being in person,
Welchel,
but
is
not
that what
quite.
you were trying to come up with, is Welchel, Dr. Welchel? Speaker.
He is with that same group, Adam Welchel, yes.
The land trust had him about 5 years ago. He's fascinating.
Yes.
He really-
Alexis, what night is this meeting?
It's a Thursday night. I'll send you a link
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like
to the whole
to,
commission.
I'd like to sit on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Comments of commissioners? Anybody have a comment they want to add here?
Just a question, Alexis, this might be a little tricky to answer. Do we track violations? Are we doing an adequate job monitoring any kind of conservation violations that may or may not be going on in the city?
Yeah, so let's see. Amelia had been listening in. She's off today, but I saw I was laughing because she was one of the attendees that were listening in. So yes, we have the Planning and Zoning Conservation Office has two kind of field inspectors where their primary job is to go out and look at properties, and they both are always on the lookout for violations. And then we always get complaints and calls from neighbors. That's where most of our our finding of violations comes from neighbors. We haven't had much yet. but this is when it starts. So nice days like today is when it starts. So we actively look around those two whenever they go anywhere to do an inspection. And so they do a mix of inspections, they do zoning inspections, but then they also do just wetlands inspections. And Amelia in particular, I asked that when she goes to an inspection that she not take the highway, that she take all the roads that are next to wetlands and watercourses, which is how I always did it, right? You kind of drive around in the areas that are that you know are wet. So she does actively go out and look, and then she also does compliance inspections. So anyone that has an open wetland permit that has indicated that they have started work, she has almost all of them on a weekly rotation of where she stops by to make sure that they're on track. Because we try to make sure that, you know, if you have a wetland permit, we want you to follow it. And we don't want at the very end, like when you do that as-built foundation survey, for example, and the surveyor shows that the demarcation wall is like 12 feet away from the wetland. We don't want that. We want to know, you know, when you're getting too close and tell you, oh, you better check. So we do all of that.
Okay,
But
so
good question. It will, so there's always a cycle, and there are always more wetland violations in the spring. Usually May
okay.
is the height of the excitement.
Yeah, it just seemed when we were looking at the satellite pictures for the apple tree, the property that we were just discussing, the neighboring property seemed like there didn't really have much of a demarcation. Like their zone literally went kind of within a 5 feet
All
zone.
the way down,
All
right?
the way down, and it seemed pretty denuded of trees. So I don't know how that referred to when the plans for building were put up, or
Yeah,
but it
so the
was
house
kind of
on, I
seemed a
think
little
it's-
bit.
yeah. On 16 Apple Tree was built in like the 1920s. So that's the short answer. It's that they cleared. It's the one that I'm thinking of, and I'll look at the aerial photo again. But there is a fair amount of clearing that was done prior to the Wetland Act, and then in the years following. Absolutely.
So are some properties grandfathered in that they'd still be allowed to maintain their lawn up to the riverbank if they did it in the 1920s? I mean,
yes. So until they, I mean, that's one of the ways that when someone does come in for a pool or an addition or something that needs, you know, an add-on to an existing house, the commission is also often looking for a mitigation, and that mitigation could provide installing a buffer. A lot of times, like there's an enhancement of a buffer, there's an existing buffer, but then you're right, sometimes people have maintained a lawn condition right up to a wetland or over in a wetland. The commission has definitely seen wetland lawns where the soil under them is a designated wetland based on soil type, but it's been maintained as lawn since, you know, 1955. And the commission has worked to kind of get some of that back. But part of the Wetland Act does allow, as an as-of-right activity, the continual maintenance of a residential property if it was established prior to the Wetland Act. So there's a lot of those, and it makes it tough because you'll have one neighbor who has a completely cleared lot, and they're just as proximal to the wetland, but the other neighbor, you know, maybe the house was built 50 years after the cleared lot, and it has trees all around it, and people's kind of, it's tough because you look and you say, well, why can't I have that? And that's kind of the nature of the beast, and that's what I think makes people's understanding of what's allowed and not allowed hard to understand, because they can turn and look at their neighbor's property and see something that I've just said, you can't do that without a permit. But that's also what the wetland regulations allow, that you can ask for a permit. But you know, the commission you have to convince the commission that you can remove those trees or change that buffer. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I want to chime in. I agree with that. I think because I live on Silvermine, on the Silvermine River, and I joined this commission. I've been talking to some of my neighbors, and this is a general level of ignorance. We just don't know exactly what those rules are. Like Catherine said, when you normal like spring cleaning, like what is right, what is wrong, right? So
right, yeah, it's you know, it's tough, and as staff, we certainly have a lot of understanding for most violations. A lot of violations are truly our homeowners that didn't know and didn't understand, and they're just looking at their property and thinking that they want more lawn or you know, a place for the kids to play soccer. So we try very hard to let them know that there are rules and regulations, and they're not. It's not that they themselves are the violation. It's just that they need to come before the commission to find a place where they can maybe get some of what they were trying to get, but the commission understanding that your role is to protect the wetlands and try to.
have we ever done a selective mailing of all the people that have the properties? There probably wouldn't be that many people that are.
It would be, it's a lot of people. I have looked into that over the years. We can generate lists. I don't have the, that would be a lot of letters. It's actually, I forget what the number is, but it's a huge amount. If you take any property that has an inland wetland, inland water course, or any upland review area, and then that doesn't capture all the ones that are, that have wetlands, but they haven't been mapped. So it would be tough. We do try to do press releases a couple times a year. I didn't do any last year during the pandemic, but we have done and the hour is generally good at doing an article about, you know, oh, if you might need a wetland permit before you clear, before you do this, check with the conservation office to make sure that you don't. Certain activities need a permit. So we try to kind of put that out in the press every once in a while. And if anyone, I'm certainly amenable to, you know, any idea that you guys have, I can research and try to make it happen.
I mean, would it be easier to approach some of the tree removal and the lawn companies just to let them know what our buffer zones and what's allowed and not allowed? Because I doubt a lot of people are just going in and clear cutting themselves or doing a lot of this work on their own.
Right. Yeah, and there definitely are. We could definitely try to generate a list of lawn care people. We didn't do just making notes. A few years back, we did try to do, as part of a pilot program, to get residents to do to just be more cognitive of the impact of their lawn care practices or their land care practices on wetlands and watercourses. We did do a pilot project in the it's in the Stony Brook watershed, which drains to the Saugatuck River. So this is kind of like the Cranberry area of Norwalk. We did a real effort at trying to get people to do a simple survey of like, would you change this practice? Would you change this practice? And then we also had a workshop for landscapers and offered them a, you know, like a cash bonus if they came. And that was like, I think pulling teeth would have been easier than getting people engaged to talk about their land care practices. Really tough. And I think we had 2 land care companies finally came, but their kind of their selling point was that they were organic. So they were much more kind of like, how can we get a certification from the city? You know, can we do this? They were, but we can, anyway, I'm babbling at this point, but that's a good idea. We can circle back. There are some good ones, and there are definitely ones that aren't.
Well, why not do the mailing? I mean, I do think we should do something. I've heard
The mailing to the
Yeah, to the
Landscaping?
I know you said that, no, well, to the residents, I know
Oh,
you
to
said
the residents?
there's a lot of people, maybe it's a big undertaking, maybe it's the cost of doing it is too high, I'm not sure, but. Any reason?
I can quantify that for the next meeting.
Okay. Or is there any best practices of things other towns do? I mean, I know you kind of just gave a couple examples, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, not that I'm aware of. I think being that if the decisions by the commission are consistent and, you know, if word gets out that you really can't do a violation without having an issue, you know, if violations aren't kind of, you know, okay, then I think word gets out that, that a town is tough on wetland violators. I do think that does have an impact over time.
Okay.
Is there a town that you've run into, Alexis, that you think of as being maybe a little more draconic than some others in terms of its local rules? I mean, for
Well, a lot of-
example, doesn't
yeah.
Westport have different setback lines than we do? Different?
Yeah, so a lot of towns have very similar wetland regulations. Your regulations are fairly closely based on the set of model municipal regulations that the state DEP put together. So your regulations are very similar to the town of Wilton's and Darien-Ann's. And then New Canaan's are a little bit different. They have smaller areas that their upland review areas, smaller in some areas and then larger in others. And they use slightly different wording. And then, right, Westport has specific named watercourses that they have different setbacks for. Westport also has a separate ordinance. What do they call it? The WPL, the water. I'm blanking on what it's called, but so they have the Inland Wetland and Watercourses Act, but then they have this other ordinance that requires kind of this other water protection line ordinance that is kind of this overlay ordinance adjacent to certain watercourses. But I'd say that theirs is, it's really hard to compare. I talked to my counterpart in Westport, and I mean, some things Westport is more strict on and more kind of draconian, and then others I'm shocked at what they allow. So it's not the easiest comparison, I would say, for Westport. Westport, a lot of its regulations are constructed differently than a lot of the surrounding municipalities. So they're always been hard to compare.
Commissioners, anything further? I just would like, Amelia's elsewhere tonight, right? She's
Yes.
doing something else. Do you know offhand if she finished that course that she was struggling through, that we both were struggling through?
I am not sure if she did. I know that you sent me your certificate of completion, and I sent it to her and let her know that Commissioner Mailing beat her. And she has not sent me a picture of her completion yet. So she is actually leaving for 2 weeks of vacation. So she'll have a 2-week bye.
Well,
But, upon her return, let's ask her.
if you keep that up, we're going to be arm wrestling before you know it. But I did take that course. I found it to be a very interesting course. The one that you can have 8 weeks to finish it, I think it is.
This is
It was
Connecticut deep for inland wetland water commissioners, correct?
right.
Right.
And I will have to say that it was the most difficult online course that I've ever had to negotiate in terms of the mechanics of it.
Oh,
So
okay.
anybody who
Very
undertakes it, I wish you luck. I'm sure it has something to do with my innate fallibility, but in any case, I did finish it and I got a blank certificate, and they're good. And I made some kind of snarky comment about it, and they wrote back and said, if you'd read the instructions, you realize that they're going to send you a real honest to God one with somebody's signature on it. That's something. So anyway, tempest in a teapot. Anything further from anybody? If not, I'm open to anybody who wants to move us out of this particular meeting.
Second.
Is that Matt? Did you just so move, Matt?
I seconded you on the
Oh, you
movement to
seconded it.
adjourn.
All right, well, then we can revert to, did somebody move it? I'll move it. Okay, so then we'll have it's been seconded and moved that we will adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Okay.
Aye.
See y'all in 2 weeks.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Alexis, will you send me a link to get on that thing on Thursday?
Yes, I will send that to the entire commission.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care.
Good night, everybody.